Today I want to talk about a question that SB Nation raised, and that is, was the Nic Claxton acquisition actually a bad trade for the Chicago Bulls? As SB Nation ranked the worst moves in the offseason, and the Nic Claxton move ranked in the top 5 of worst moves this offseason. We'll talk a little bit about that. Plus, I want to talk about the perceived problem for the Chicago Bulls. I've talked about it, a lot of people talked about it, the shooting concern with the Bulls, and why the Chicago Bulls can actually be a much better three-point shooting team than I think people are giving it credit for. We're going to talk about why and the reasons for concern and more right after this. What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go into this content for today, y'all. So, SB Nation ranked the Nic Claxton acquisition as the 5th worst move in the entire NBA offseason. They ranked all 7 worst moves. The only moves that ranked worse than the Bulls' acquisition of Nic Claxton was the Lakers trading for Walker Kessler, all the picks they included, and the Knicks letting Mitchell Robinson walk away. But other than that, the Bulls came in at 5th. The ones that were worse than the Bulls were the Pelicans doing nothing with their roster, the Suns trading for Miles Bridges, the Wizards giving Trae Young a max contract, and then coming in at number 1 was Gary Trent's deal at $64 million. Now, you know, my perception on this is a little bit different, but we're going to talk about both sides and why SB Nation does have some legitimate criticisms here. I'm not going to act like they don't. There are some reasons for legit criticism here, but I want to talk first about this, right? SB Nation ranked Nic Claxton acquisition as the 5th worst, and mainly because of the asset management issue that they look at it, right? They say that they use cap space, because the Bulls use cap space to take on $44 million in salary over 2 years, and the fact that they got nothing back for that. So the question that comes with it is that, should Brooklyn have paid Chicago more to absorb Nic Claxton's contract? And I get that mindset, right? Because of people that are looking at it as a bad contract. That's what they're looking at the Nic Claxton thing. It was a bad contract, and because he's been 2 years on a decline, and that's why they look at it. But I look at it in a different way. One, Nic Claxton fills one of the largest holes that the Chicago Bulls roster has had, and that's for a while. The Bulls were 22nd in defensive rating. They allowed 58.9% shooting in the paint, right? And we have not had a legitimate backline defender at all in so long, especially over the time that we had Nikola Vucevic here. So because of the mobility, the length, the switchability, all the type of stuff that Nic Claxton brings, and it being a more fit with Josh Giddey and for Caleb Wilson and Buzelis for that matter, I understand why the Bulls did that. With now Nic Claxton's acquisition, the Bulls can play drop defense, they can switch, they can blitz, they can show, and they can recover. All those things are hugely important to Tiago Splitter's defensive system, right? So the Bulls did not need another theoretical center. We needed somebody who can actually help protect the back line. And that's what they got in Nic Claxton. They got a center that stylistically fits with what they're going to do. It allows for Caleb Wilson and Miles Buzelis to be more aggressive with what they do on the perimeter defense. I've talked about this a lot, right? Miles and Caleb Wilson are going to make mistakes defensively. It's going to happen, right? Especially because Miles is still learning to deal with the physicality. Caleb Wilson's a rookie. Mistakes are going to happen. Nic Claxton helps cover up some of those mistakes. It allows Caleb Wilson to apply pressure out on the perimeter when he switches, and it also covers up for like weak pick and roll defenders in Josh Giddey and Miles Buzelis, who are still growing in that place. The value that Nic Claxton brings isn't just in blocks; it's in the stylistic confidence that you get from how you can use Nic Claxton. Then also the fact that Josh Giddey can make Nic Claxton's offense easy, right? He simplifies Nic Claxton's offense. Nic Claxton averaged 11.7 points on 57% shooting. And his role here for the Chicago Bulls is going to be very simple. Run, set screens, roll to the basket, cut when you need to, catch lobs, and then crash the offensive glass and get some possessions offensively there for you, right? That's it. It's a very simplified role that Nic Claxton can come in. So you're not necessarily betting on Nic Claxton to regain form, but we will talk about that more in a second. You're betting on him to be able to live within those margins. Now, $20 million for living within the margins could be very expensive, and I understand the question there. Make no mistake about that. I understand the question that's asked in regards to that. But at the same time, when you have a player that doesn't need touches to be productive, I think that, that the timing, the rim pressure, all that, and the growth that Nic Claxton showed as a passer last season as well, and how that can help out the short roll for the Chicago Bulls, how that can help in areas where like Caleb Wilson or Buzelis are cutting to the rim. So all that affords the Chicago Bulls an area of grace, right? To where, again, you are coming in asking him to just do the things that you do well, stay active, stay engaged, those type of things, and Josh Giddey is going to give you the ball. And then, like I said, Nic Claxton's his passing as well, right? He averaged 3.7 assists last year. And if teams sag off of him, you can use that, especially if he's at the elbow. What that means is that you can do dribble handoffs to Buzelis. You can do a Norman Powell curl coming off a screen. You can do a Caleb Wilson back cut, right? Nic Claxton doesn't have to be a passer like Nikola Jokic, but he does have to be a heads-up passer, and he's already shown an ability to do that with probably not as strong of a team, right? So if your non-shooting center can screen, roll, finish, and pass, I think that that's something that overcomes even the shortcomings of there, right? So I don't think the trade was a disaster for the Bulls. I don't think it was one of the worst moves of the offseason, right? You essentially use your cap space to get Nic Claxton. He doesn't have a long-term salary. It's a declining contract. It's less next year than it is this year. On top of that, so you're gaining more cap space in that. You didn't, yes, we did not have to trade any picks to get him either. Yes, we didn't get any. But when you look around the NBA, like, there were star players that didn't get unprotected first-round picks. And, even if the Bulls would have got a couple of more seconds, is that something that would have made this trade that much better? Is that like what basically SB Nation is saying here? I think when you look at this, right, the fact that you also didn't give up. You didn't give up any. You didn't have to give up Leonard Miller, who's on the end of your bench, not the end of your bench, but who's a player that you're trying to develop that's young, that the Brooklyn Nets very well could have tried to acquire. You didn't give up any of that. You gave up no future flexibility really at all. And so, like, had the Bulls given up something like a Leonard Miller or something, then that would have drastically changed the conversation for me. But you use cap space to fill a hole in starting center, and you got a starting center that, again, yes, you are hoping that decline defensively staves off and you start getting back to him what he was before at his prime. But at the same time, I'm not worried. It's not a negative there for me, right? So here's the thing. The Bulls didn't pay a premium to get Nic Claxton. They used cap space to fill a real basketball need for this team, and stylistically, the fit there is worth the cost. Again, that's my personal opinion. But then let's talk about the concerns, because there are some legitimate concerns. Of course, the spacing could get real ugly. Nic Claxton's not a shooter at all, right? He's only made 3 threes last season. You're not going to look at him to be a shooter at all, right? And so that part of it could get a problem. We're going to dive more into that, though, in detail. Starting Caleb, Giddey, and Nic Claxton could create some pretty cramped possessions, just to be frank there. So while Nic Claxton does help the defense, the Bulls have to make sure that it does not accidentally make Caleb Wilson's life a little bit harder on the offensive side of the ball or anybody's. We'll see what happens in that one. Of course, Nic Claxton's rebounding has also fallen off as well. He only averaged 6.9 rebounds last season. I've dived into that deeply in regards to how the Brooklyn Nets changed their system that moved Nic Claxton a little bit further away from the basket, then on top of that, he had a back injury that also is a concern there, right? But when you look at it, he's previously posted several seasons of at least 9 rebounds. So there you go into that one. I do think this is that if Chicago cannot run, if we don't finish the defensive possessions, or to rebound, a block shot, or a steal, that's going to happen there. And with Buzelis at the 3, Caleb Wilson more than likely at the 4, Nic Claxton's going to have to rebound better. That's just the reality of it in that. You need him to get closer to what he did in 2022-24. You need that, right? You cannot be a transition team if you don't rebound the ball well. Then on top of that, the question of which Nic Claxton did the Bulls get? The regression is the swing factor here. If that regression was because you were on a tanking team that didn't have a lot of talent, and now that you're on a team that's going to be trying to compete, you're back to playing your main role, then great, right? When you look at the peak of Nic Claxton, he averaged 12.6 points, 9.2 rebounds, and 2.5 blocks. That's exactly what you need from Nic Claxton on this team specifically. Last season, though, he averaged 11.7 points, 6.9 rebounds, and 1.1 blocks. Now, I can make a case for those numbers still help the Chicago Bulls if he gives that consistently. The numbers aren't terrible, but the defensive impact that he had did drop. And if Splitter can get him back to near his peak form, not expecting him to get back to that, if you can get there, then yeah, the trade almost becomes a steal there. And then the opportunity cost, right, that you have there. You use cap space. We had cap space. Brooklyn wanted to move Nic Claxton. Minnesota wanted to move Julius Randle. And Chicago helped facilitate that deal, and they got Nic Claxton out of that. Did Bryson Graham ask for a pick or pick swap or anything like that? We will never know from the outside. And that's part of like why these rankings are always interesting, because they almost talk about it as if we know that Bryson didn't ask for some second-round pick swaps or something like that. But the question is just not only if Nic Claxton helps, it's whether or not the Bulls should have gotten paid for helping facilitate that three-team trade. But it is what it is. Final verdict for me is that two things can be true at the same time. Graham may have been able to squeeze out another asset in the second-round pick or something. Claxton can also still be a good basketball addition as well. When you look at what the Bulls needed with defense, a center, rim protection, transition mobility, schematic fit, all that type of stuff, Nic Claxton checks those boxes. And not one of the worst moves, in my personal opinion, but it's not a risk-free move either. So again, two things can be true at the same time, and let's see which one comes out this season for the Chicago Bulls. But let's transition to the next topic, because even in the last topic, I had to talk about the shooting. And the shooting is so oftenly talked about with the Chicago Bulls team, right? And I think I'm saying this, I'm not saying that the Bulls are going to be one of the best shooting teams in the league, but I am saying that the Bulls could be a better functional shooter than maybe what their reputation and what the league is telling you. Right now, on paper, the shooting questions are obvious for the Chicago Bulls. Of course, I just talked about Nic Claxton, an acquisition that's not a shooter. Caleb Wilson shot 25.9% at UNC. Dalen Swain did not make a single three in Summer League. Isaac Okoro shot 33% from three last season. But the reputation may be a bit behind the reality for the Chicago Bulls, and this is what I mean in this. The Bulls shooting is not going to be elite. I'm not even going to try to paint that. I'm not even going to try to squint my eyes hard enough to even try to see an elite three-point shooting team from the Bulls, because I don't see that, right? But the Bulls don't need to be Boston Celtics from three. They just need to be good enough from three that the offense doesn't completely collapse, and it keeps defenses honest as far as guarding them at the three-point line. I want to talk about the reasons why the Chicago Bulls can be a better three-point shooting team than what people are expecting. One, Josh Giddey is not the same shooter that he was in Oklahoma City. That's just the period point blank point there. He shot 37.8% from three in his first Bull season. He shot 36.4% from three last season, taking 5.2 attempts. That's not elite, but it's respectable enough to where defenses can't sag off of him anymore. That's an important part of this, right? If Josh Giddey stays around 36 to 38% shooting from three, spacing becomes a lot more manageable for the Chicago Bulls. It's a big difference in how you guard a team when you go from you can leave Josh Giddey alone, leave him open, and that we prefer that he shoots, to Josh Giddey's moved into the category to where it's now, wait, we got to guard Josh Giddey at the three-point line. That change matters a whole lot when you talk about the open lanes, the driving lanes, the cutting ability for that, the pick and roll defense. It matters a lot for that. And so Josh Giddey's acceleration from three-point shooting is a huge part of that. Now we got to see him keep it up, but for what it's worth, he's kept it up now 2 years in a row. And the volume, 5.2, was the most volume of his career, and he hit it still at over 36%. Then the Modest Buzelis part of it. Modest has already become a volume three-point shooter, right? He shot 34.9% from three last year on taking 6.4 attempts per game, and he made 173 threes on the season. Here's the thing, though. I think that Modest could go down a little bit in volume, and the efficiency could go up as well. And Norman Powell's going to help with that. We'll talk about that more in a second. The question for Modest isn't about the willingness to shoot the three. It's about his consistency to hit the open three. And that's what we're going to look at. If Modest keeps the same volume, let's just say he keeps the 6.4 threes per game, but he hits that at more like a 36, 37% clip, the spacing becomes real at that point. Because again, much like we just talked about with Josh Giddey, it goes from, damn, is Modest hot from three today, which is right now I think where teams are. It's like, is Modest hot from three? Okay, we'll guard him. Is he cold from three? Okay, let's leave him open until he starts hitting a few. If he starts becoming a 36 to 37% three-point shooter, it then goes to, all right, you have to guard him at the three-point line every single time, right? Modest is not the type of player that defenses are going to ignore anyway, but if he can keep that, if he can get to that 36 to 37% on the same volume, it becomes night and day on how you have to guard Modest Buzelis. Again, these are ifs. Next up, Caleb Wilson has changed the conversation a little bit around the Chicago Bulls shooting, and he should have. His Summer League, it didn't erase the concern, because Summer League, again, good or bad, shouldn't be taken as like this one-for-one deep take. but it has changed the question a little bit around Caleb Wilson, right? The 25.9% that he shot at North Carolina is there, right? Now, it wasn't on high volume, but in Summer League, he shot 41.9% from three. He opened up the Vegas Summer League going 7 of 11 from deep in the first game. And through 4 Summer League games, he didn't. It does not necessarily make him a 42% NBA shooter from three, but it does change the question now from, oh, he can't shoot to, all right, is he going to be a better shooter than what we think? And also, all right, are we going to have to guard him more than what we thought at the three? If Caleb Wilson ends up being, I would even say 33 to 35% on decent volume as a rookie, the Bulls will take that all day long, not only because of what that means for his progression going forward as a player, but also what that means for the offense functionally right now. It makes the offense better right now for the Chicago Bulls if Caleb Wilson's able to shoot that three. Just keep defenses respectable. I'm not expecting you to be a knockdown three-point shooter in your rookie year, but if you show those flashes to keep the defense honest in your rookie year, that means a lot for the Bulls going forward and what this could mean and look like for the Bulls in Caleb Wilson's second, third year, going on from that, right? And then also, Norman Powell changes the math here for the Bulls quite a bit, actually. He is the most proven shooter in the starting five, 38% from three last season. He made 156 threes on 410 attempts. He can shoot off the catch. He can shoot off movement. He can pull up. He can also shoot coming around screens. The gravity of the three-point shooting of Norman Powell is absolutely legit. And so, therefore, when you look at the Josh Giddey, Powell, Modest, Caleb, and Nic Claxton starting five, there only has one true non-shooter on it, right? If these things come to fruition. And so if you have, and I've said before too, you still have to guard Caleb Wilson at the three-point line, even if his three-point shot isn't falling, because his ability to get that quick first step and finish at the rim, if you give him that gap, which is typically how you play non-shooters at the three-point line, if you give them just a little bit of gap because you're playing them for the drive, his quick first step and hops, it's barbecue chicken for you in there, right? So even with that stuff, like this Bulls starting three, if the Bulls starting five all kind of hits that, or in any combination of those things hit, then it goes from the Bulls are the shooting's questionable to the Bulls are a perfectly serviceable three-point shooting team. But then let's also talk about the Jalen Smith part of this. While so many people are talking about potentially trading Jalen Smith, let's not overlook the fact that he shot 37% from three last year. And this is why I personally don't want to see him play a lot of the five. I want to see him play more of the four. That's always where he's been more productive at with the Chicago Bulls. But that three-point shooting, it offers so much for the Chicago Bulls. It gives Tiago Splitter an alternate. It allows the minutes that he's out there for Nic Claxton to focus on defense, switching, and rim protection. And I'd say this. I know that Zach Collins, a lot of people are down on Zach Collins. When Zach Collins is healthy, you also have to play him for the pick and pop and to potentially shoot the three. So Smith gives the Bulls shooting. He gives them offensive versatility. He gives them rim protection. He gives them rebounding. Don't overlook Jalen Smith's value, especially in the Chicago Bulls being a better three-point shooting team. Because he's not just a good backup 4 or 5. He's a player that absolutely gives the Bulls front court shooting that we don't have in abundance anywhere else that he could provide that. So I'll say this. The Bulls shooting is a concern, but it's not a disaster. It's not the disaster that some people have painted it out to be. Even when I've talked about the Chicago Bulls shooting, I've talked about how rough the shooting could be for the Chicago Bulls team, and we're going to see. Right now, on paper, the shooting's a problem. And I'm not saying that that's not going to be a problem. It's not going to be there. Because even with the Josh Giddey, the Modest Buzelis, volume shooting is still a problem for this team. Josh Giddey shooting 36% is good, right, for a percentage, but what about the volume? And that's really what it's going to say for the Chicago Bulls. The percentage may be good. Hell, the Bulls weren't a bad three-point shooting percent team last season. We weren't, right? But the volume is there. And so when you have to take a huge amount of volume for that and you either don't stay efficient or you can't keep it up, that's where you get to, right? Chicago, last season, we shot 35.6% from three as a team last season. We made 1,169 threes on 3,287 attempts. That's not something that you look at and say, oh, my God, we're a great three-point shooting team. But that's also not something that you ignore and just say, oh, we're just going to be bad from that, right? There's going to be parts of this that fit better. There's going to be parts of that may fit a little bit worse. There's going to be some rough parts in this for the Chicago Bulls. But I think overall, looking at this for me, the Chicago Bulls aren't going to be necessarily as terrible as some people are thinking from three, and we actually can make it close to a strength if all those other what-ifs come together, if some of those what-ifs come together for the Chicago Bulls. And we got to see, right? And I didn't even mention, like, if Dalen Swain shoots better, Isaac Okoro shoots better, hell, Rob Dillingham gives you something. I don't know what's going to happen in regards to that. But I do think that people that are just blankly saying that the Chicago Bulls are going to be some terrible three-point shooting team, I don't know if that's necessarily going to be correct. I'm not saying it's going to be completely off either. I just don't know if that's necessarily going to be the most correct thing, that the Bulls are just going to be some terrible three-point shooting team. But time will tell what that's going to work out for the Chicago Bulls. But let me know what you guys think and feel down below, man. I want to hear from you guys. How do you feel about the Nic Claxton trade? How do you feel about the Bulls being mentioned, as one of the worst moves of the offseason? How do you feel about the three-point shooting? Do you think it could be more of a benefit than what people are thinking like I do? Let me know that down below. Otherwise, make sure you guys like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode or an upload. You can follow us at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullscentralpod@gmail.com. And lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Love you guys. Go Bulls. See red, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks